Welcome to the 2% Factor podcast. I'm your host, Dan Conway. What this podcast is really all about is hearing from people what their stories are along their path to success. Along that path to success, we find a lot of stories about failure and a lot of other things that people can learn from. And really what we're trying to break down are what were the small moments, what were the tiny decisions and micro decisions that they made along the way that ended up having a massive impact on the outcome. So please join us in listening to a variety of different stories to hear how people got to where they are and opportunities to learn and impact your life. You're seeking to push yourself hard enough where failure can happen.
Push the envelope, but make sure you're pushing the envelope in service to others, in alignment with the laws of the universe, from a place of love, from a place of gratitude. Push that envelope. And if it doesn't work, we can fix that. But pushing the envelope in service to yourself, you make too many mistakes that way and you're going to be out.
Welcome to the 2% Factor podcast, where we explore small things that make a massive difference in someone's journey and their story. Today, with us on the podcast, I want to welcome Joe Terry. Joe was an former middle linebacker for the Seattle Seahawks, which is my team, by the way. Joe, I don't know if I mentioned that to you. Big Seahawk fan for many, many years. Joe's also a seasoned leader, been a CEO of multiple companies, including Corporate Visions, and right now is the CEO of a company called Culture Partners. So welcome, Joe. Looking forward to our conversation today.
Yeah, great.
Give us kind of, Joe, your 90-second story, and then we'll break down the conversation from there in terms of kind of the 2% factors that impacted, your life.
Boy, your whole story in 90 seconds, huh?
That's it.
No
more.
That's a big question. So
it's a big ask.
It is the big ask. Yeah. I'll just say, growing up as a kid, middle class family, your average Joe, and had all the same challenges and opportunities that most kids have, growing up. I got into football early and had a good career in high school and college and into the NFL. And that process completely changed my mindset and how I think about life. And I thought from that point, I said to myself, it was always a goal of mine as a kid, but I was always too small, too slow, too whatever, from the wrong school, not good enough, not this, not that. And just getting to that point, even though it was for a very short time in the NFL, it started me on a journey where I dedicated my life to human potential and understanding and studying human potential and performance and how to help people and businesses reach that full potential. And it just started my journey. That was the catapult for my journey from then on. Like, okay, anything's possible. And how do you use this experience and understand humans and what makes them tick and how to bring the best out in any individual? And from then on, it catapulted me in my career. And then, I got into sales and leadership, and, the rest is I won't say the rest is history, because it's not over yet. I'm still learning every single day. So, yeah.
Yeah. I can't wait to get into this conversation about human potential. Because what's interesting about your story, knowing you, I've known you for several years now, is I know that when you go back into those college years, that wasn't like the intention, right? You weren't obsessed with human potential at that
No,
point. All
no.
right. So let's start at college. Let's go back into there. I mean, what kind of goals did you have for yourself at that time? Did you like when did you get to the place where you realized you actually had a shot at the NFL? You know what I mean? Walk us through how that all happened.
Yeah, so I actually have to back up one step to my junior year in high school in a humanities class. This
Okay.
is like, this was the jump off point, and I wish I could find this teacher. She changed my life forever. You know what I mean?
She might be listening right now.
I hope so because, it's Amador Valley High School, my junior year. So it was 1981, 82, somewhere in that year. And she sat us down and she said, class, we're going to do a perceived self, ideal self exercise. And here's what I want you to do. I want you to, build two collages. One is your perceived self, how you see yourself today. And the next one is your ideal self, right? And so you're cutting out magazines and you're putting words on there. And I still have this collage today, right? Perceived self, ideal self. And what she was doing is she was setting up this mindset of ideal self. Like you can strive for and achieve your ideal self. And I never knew this concept, right? Very, very simple yet profound concept. And she took that concept and then turned it into a goal setting exercise. And so she said, okay, I want you to write down your 5 goals for that you want to achieve over the next 5 years. And again, I was like, okay, I've never done a goal setting exercise,
Yeah.
And so I start writing down these goals. And she said, I want you to write it down, put the date, the year, and so I wrote it down and I folded it up, right? And I went on about my life, I was a pretty good high school football player, and colleges came knocking, and every day the mailman would show up, and that in that era you would get letters in the mail and coaches would call you once a week. It was very strict guidelines, so different than it is today, and it was very structured. And so I thought, I was going to get a scholarship to play football and blah blah blah. And what happened was my senior year, the summer before my senior year in high school, I got mono and I lost 35 pounds 2 weeks before the
Wow.
football season. Yeah. So I played at 170 pounds at middle linebacker and I was 205, right? And this
Yeah.
is again back in 1982. And so all these colleges that were looking at me came to see me play and they're like, hey, the guy's a really good football player, but he's 170 pounds, 170-pound high school linebackers are a dime a dozen, right?
Yeah.
And so they came back and said, multiple schools said, well, why don't you walk on? So at this point, Dan, I was like, I was way behind the 8 ball on reaching the NFL, but that was always my dream. It was always my dream.
Yeah. What's when you look back on that, what do you think when you look at those two different versions of yourself, kind of the way you see yourself and what you could be? What keeps people from seeing that naturally? Because the way we perceive ourselves, right, keeps us down. It keeps us in this box of, we think we can achieve until you take a second and kind of step out of that and look at things differently. You know what I mean? It's such a powerful exercise.
It was because our reality is what we see in our head.
Right.
And she took
Well,
that
and we live it every day.
every day,
Right.
right? And
Yeah.
it's in our own head and
Yeah.
it's talking to ourselves, right?
Yeah. This is what I'm good at. This is what I'm not good at. This is how people know me. This is what they know me being good at. Right. And then you start living in this artificial constraint of what that is versus pushing the boundaries of what it could be.
Absolutely. And she took those shackles off with
Hmm.
that exercise and said, no, no, no. This is your perceived self. Let's go to the ideal.
Yeah.
Let's take all boundaries away. Go for it. The ideal. It just gives me chills just as I talk about it
Yeah.
right now. It just transported me back to a 16-year-old kid. You know what I mean? And it's like, wow, what a
Yeah.
profound thing to get out of your own head and go, ideal self right here.
Yeah.
Let's work in this realm for a little while.
Yeah. Yeah. I get it. It's so interesting you're telling me this because about a week ago, I was actually telling my son how I remembered, I think it was sixth grade, that uh, my teacher at that point had asked us to write down like 20 things that we wanted to accomplish in our lives that we almost didn't think were possible. Right, kind of similar. Didn't do quite the same exercise, but write down 20 like amazing things you never think will happen, but you would like to have happen, kind of thing. And at that time, I was a big basketball fan, really into sports and different things like that. And I wrote down some of my 20 were like people that I wanted to meet. And some of those things ended up happening.
Yeah.
And I remember looking back pretty recently and saying, boy, it's funny when you look back at that, I thought those things were crazy.
Yeah.
Growing up in a smaller town, not really access to, anything too outlandish. Or I was a Navy kid. So I couldn't even imagine how I would meet someone like a Charles Barkley,
Right.
right? Which ended up happening,
Yeah.
right? Different things like that. So it is really powerful when you think back at those things that shape you at such a young age.
And so what happened then is your first stage of adversity on your dream, where all of a sudden all these scholarship offers disappear, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And they say, "Hey, why don't you come walk on?" And I'm like, I don't want to walk on and be somebody's punching bag, right? I want to go to a school that wants me. And
Yeah.
so the local college, Division II college says, "Hey, you can come here and play as a freshman." You know what I mean? And I thought that was pretty cool, and I'm like, all right, well, I'll go play there, and had a great career, college career, played all 4 years, all conference, blah, 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 right? Awards,
Mhm.
blah, blah, blah. But, and then, went to Seattle and played for a very short time and enough to get a few checks and to be considered a 1 year NFL veteran, right? But the next point of adversity was the general manager coming, not the general manager, but it's the gopher guy, and he comes to the locker room and he says, "Hey Terry, coach wants to see you. Bring your playbook." And I'm like, "Ah, crap. Here it comes," right?
Who was the coach at that time?
It was Chuck Knox, right?
Oh, wow.
So I grab my playbook, grab everything, and everybody's looking at you as you walk out of the locker room, go down the hallway. It's like, walk into coach's office and, he gives you the speech that, "Hey, really appreciate you being part of the team and your contribution, but we're going to have to let you go," right? And I say at that point, he's like chewing on a cigar. That's what Chuck Knox, he's chewing. And Chuck Knox says, I said, "Hey, coach, I really want to play in the NFL. I really want to play. What do you think I got to do to stick in the NFL?" And he sits back in his chair like this, old chair, creaking like the chair I got. And he's chewing on the cigar and he's like, "Terry, you're a hell of a linebacker, but you're just not good enough to be in the NFL."
Wow.
And I was like, "Oh, you know what I mean?"
Yeah.
And you know what? He was right. It was you know what I mean? It's my story wasn't going to play out like some Cinderella. Oh, he worked really hard and didn't take no for an answer, right? It was one of those things, and I always remembered that, and I just remember flying home going, you know what? I'm not going to let that ever happen again. I'm going to find the place where I can go be the best in the world at something,
Yeah.
or at least be striving for it over a long period of time. And what's interesting, Dan, is then I went home, flew home, and to my parents' house, and I was unpacking stuff because I was going to be moving out.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, I come across the piece of paper. And I open up this piece of paper from my humanities class, the 5 goals.
Really?
And I'm like, holy crap. 4 of the 5 came true.
Wow.
4 of the 5, right? And, when I wrote those down, that was ideal self, right? As perceived ideal. She said, write these goals down. And I said, wow, this works. There's something here about anybody can be anything. And so that started the journey on the professional track, transitioning, from the athletic track to
Yeah.
the professional track. And so that started it.
So, a couple of questions. One, I'm curious, what were some examples of the other ones on the list? You got 4 out of 5 done. NFL.
Yeah, so it was play college football,
Yeah.
right? And it was because I was a linebacker.
Yeah.
The mark of a linebacker is okay. I wanted to set the school record for tackles in a season and for a career, and both of those things happened. And it was make all conference,
Yeah.
3 out of 4 years, and that happened. And then I didn't make all American. That was like the fifth one that I didn't get.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's like the NFL one was the hardest. So it's
Yeah.
like
That's the big one. Yeah.
I'll let that one go.
So let's back up. We went, the bad news was getting let go from the Seahawks, right? Which
Yeah,
was a
right.
tough day. What about the good news? What was it like signing with an NFL team?
Yeah. It was crazy because I thought to myself, I'm 21 years old. I'm making all this money. Each week you got to check. Every Tuesday you got to check. And I was like, what do you do with this, right? As a college kid, and all of a sudden you're getting these checks, and I was sending them home. And I'll never forget walking off the field. The practice facility was in Kirkland, Washington, and it overlooked the lake right there.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget walking off the field, practice field one day, and I'm looking at myself going, I'm in a Seattle Seahawks uniform, and all the press is lined up there as you as you come off the field because they want to talk to you, and and I'm thinking, I'm actually getting paid to play this game. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And this is my job. You wake up, you eat, you lift weights, you watch film, you go practice, you go back to watching film, you eat again, you go home, go to bed, and I thought that was the greatest thing ever. And
Yeah.
it's like I can't believe they're actually paying me to play a game.
Yeah. Amazing. So, I mean, something that such a small percentage of people get to experience. When you look back in terms of kind of 2% factor moments, you know, like clearly one of those moments was, the ability to do that goal exercise and here's where I am, here's what I could be. What what else was within that journey getting to the NFL that a couple of small choices that ended up making a massive difference in your ability to achieve that success?
Yeah, and again, for that time
Yeah,
period,
for that chapter, that.
right, you can apply it multiple going forward, but for that chapter, the other one was I was okay with the monotony of it. like it started as a 14-year-old kid, all the way to a 18-year-old kid and all the way through college. I was okay with the monotony of every day working on nutrition, every day training, off season on. And this was before now they have like all these, they have these facilities that you can go to, and they're
Yeah,
all high.
nutritionists
Yeah,
and everything around you.
there was none of that. There was like, this was, and so I enjoyed that process. And I was like, okay, if I can just follow the process, I can at least put myself in a position to start in college and to be a great player in college. And so I looked at it almost like a job right from high school. And quite frankly, I didn't get great grades. I wasn't really interested in doing heavy study.
Yeah.
It was all about that, right?
Yeah.
And the study piece would come later, but applying myself to that, that was a learning for me that said, hey, you apply yourself. People, the biggest challenge is people just don't want to get up every single day and do it again and again and again and again and again.
Yeah.
And Dan, I freaking love that part. You know what I mean? Like, I was like, okay, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that same process is like my Ironman coach says, strong like bull, smart like tractor, right?
Mm.
And what he means is a tractor
Just keeps going. Just keeps going. Yeah.
and so if you can be strong like a bull and smart like a tractor and just follow every day, just be doing it, right?
Hmm.
And I took that process into, you know, my relationship with my wife, showing up every day, my relationship with my kids, my
Hmm.
relationship with my employees, my relationship with my friends. It's like, that you can count on me every day. I'm going to be there.
Yeah.
It may not be pretty every day, right? But I'm not going anywhere.
The
Not
tractor's there.
the tractor.
Sometimes you might get the bull,
Yeah,
but the tractor's going to be there.
yeah,
Yeah. I like
yeah,
it. That's good. All right. So you just got delivered crushing news.
yeah,
I mean, it's crushing, right?
yeah.
I mean,
It's
when
your
you go,
dream. It's your whole dream. Yeah,
yeah, and everything you worked for, and you go back, you're not one of those guys, where this piece of luck followed this piece of luck, and next thing you know, you're in the NFL. I mean, it was a dedicated, goal setting and disciplined approach to achieving what your goal was, which was the
right,
NFL, and you got there.
right,
And then you were told this isn't going to work,
right.
right? And then you went back and you found the paper and you saw. So kind of going back to that part in your journey, then what happened from there?
Yeah, from there it was like, okay, so this process works. If I can replicate it in my career, in my life, I can have that ideal self. Remember, perceived self, ideal self,
Yeah.
whatever that is. And so I just began to consume as much information and books and everything as I could around how to optimize human performance as it relates to all your life in general, not just from an athletic perspective. And the principles apply athletically and professionally and personally.
Hmm.
And so I was like, growing up in my high school team and my college team, I was always the team captain. And I really enjoyed that from a leadership perspective. But the leadership perspective was from a place of in service to others. Like,
Hmm.
I love people, you know what I mean? And I wanted to help people. And so I said, I want to run a company one day. where I can build this culture that's in service to the employees. And so, Joe, how do you map that out? How did, you know what I mean? And so I began to map that career out in my personal life, and, and then what was I going to do from a health perspective, and what was that going to look like as well? And so all aspects of my life began to map that out. And, you know, boy, there's been along the way serious adversity along the way, you know what I mean?
Mm,
But it goes back to that original education from that humanities class that, look, there's going to be these bumps along the road, as there were to the 5 goals that I first wrote down. It wasn't a straight line. It looked
yeah.
like this. And if you would have said as a freshman, there's no way that guy's going to make it in the NFL, right? I mean, he's just never going to get there.
Yeah.
You would have said that, right? Based on the circumstances. So just to watch that and be able to watch that film and play that forward, go, nothing's out of the equation.
Yeah.
No matter where you are in your life, nothing that comes from here that you ultimately want that's an alignment, with at least the laws of the universe, that's in the betterment of the universe, yourself, those around you. Nothing is out of the question.
Mm. That's such an inspiring story. I, it's something we haven't talked about this in the past, just in regular conversations we've had, but I feel like reflection is a big part of your life. Like when you, I mean, tell me if that's true or not. Like when you look back at what occurred, a lot of people, you made a decision for that not to be the pinnacle of your story,
Right,
right? I mean, you said, "Hey, I got here," but then one of the biggest lessons you pulled from it was the fact is I got here. And how did I get here?
right,
Right. And you reflected on that process and then made the next chapter in your journey and created the goals around that.
right.
But if you didn't take the time to, take a beat, take a breath, and kind of digest what occurred in order to figure out how to parlay that for your future, you may not have ever achieved it where you are now, your business success.
Yeah, absolutely. And what it did today, if you look forward a bit, it was the whole reason why I got into Ironman and the
Mm,
training. You can't just show up to an Ironman. You can't fake it. You've got to put that time in, that process, wake up every day and train for an Ironman. And then you get into a race and it's brutal. You want to quit. I mean, your brain goes to places that you would never imagine. And it's all about you want to quit. You know what I mean? And then you turn a corner and all of a sudden you're like, oh, I could run for days. And then 5 minutes later, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to be able to finish. And what it does is, Dan, is it takes life and it shrinks it down to an 11-hour process.
yeah.
And it's self-imposed adversity.
Mm,
You know what I mean? And
yeah.
because
Yeah.
what I
Yeah. I mean, you
realized,
chose this pain.
exactly, because
Yeah.
what I realized is my ability to work through adversity is is going to help me show up for other people and be there for other people and achieve my goals. And so I thought to myself, what this does is it's self-imposed adversity because it's just like a muscle. And so I believe that our ability to walk into adversity, understand it, as you said, reflect on it, and not let it consume you and destroy you is is the superpower
Mm,
for individuals, companies. This is human performance optimized.
mm,
And so I don't even like to swim, bike, or run. I don't like any of them. You know what I mean? But what it does do is it builds that muscle, And I'm not saying like I'm better than anybody else. I'm not saying that. It's for me.
For you, for you, Joe, it charges your battery.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because when I hear you talk about it, there's things that I think there's value in in understanding things from our childhood that matter relative to future success. And then also things that you experienced as a child, pattern you break, and there's patterns you want to keep. And to me, when you talk about this to me is your pattern of what you experienced as, middle school to high school, and your formula and your Joe Terry blueprint, if you will.
Right.
Like you have confidence in this, in what occurs in your life when you build this muscle.
Right. Exactly. And you nailed it. And Dan, so it's not like you don't want to be in this head. It's the crazy train sometimes, right? I'm working through everything that anybody else is working through. It's just I want to put my brain through a test so that when all hell is breaking loose around me, I'm like, okay, I got it. It's all right.
It's going to be okay.
It's going to be okay. I know it feels like hell right now, but there's something there on the other side. And so getting back to what we were talking about my family, my kids, my wife, my friends, my employees, my coworkers, my company, my investors,
Yeah.
whoever it is. You know what I mean? It's like, I'm not going to quit on you. Now,
Mm-hmm.
you might have to drag my ass out of here. You might have to beat me, you know what I mean? But it's like, I'm not quitting on you. I am
Yeah.
not, you know what I mean? And I want them to know that. And by doing those things that, at least for me, for
Yeah.
somebody else, it might be a 5K. For somebody else, it might be,
It might be meditation. It
it
might be,
totally, exactly.
I think the point that I'm hearing from you on it, which is really a great takeaway, I think, for people, is understanding yourself to know what that is. And you may not know it right now. Somebody listening right now may not know it, but they might be
Right.
thinking about what that could be.
Right.
Um, just while we're here, I've never done an Ironman. There could be several people listening that don't really know what it is. Walk through kind of a rough definition of the torture that it is.
Yeah. The day of torture. So it
Yeah.
starts with a 2.5 mile open water ocean swim, usually with 3,000 of your best friends. So it's a slugfest swim for 2.5 miles. You get out of that, and then you're greeted with a 112-mile bike, usually in some hot, humid place with lots of hills or what have you. It's never easy. It's never this flat, simple ride. And then when you get off the bike, you get greeted with a marathon. So you get to go then.
You get the treat. You get the treat of a marathon at the end.
Yeah. So you've been on the bike for, 5+ hours, and then you get to go run a marathon, and your legs feel like bricks, right? And so, and it is a wonderful process because you're in your head all day. I was telling Mac earlier about it, and he's like, you don't get to wear headphones or anything. And I'm like, no,
Wow.
it's all about you and your brain,
Yeah.
and
It's really, really a competition against yourself, it sounds
totally,
like.
totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
You mentioned I got 11 hours to, figure this out. I bet in a lot of ways it's 11, you're living through the 11 seconds in front of you and the 11 minutes in front of you, just trying to iteratively fight through it, I would guess.
Oh, it is. And you just make a great point because you cannot finish it if you're thinking about what's
Yeah.
up, right?
Yeah.
Because it's too overwhelming.
Yeah.
So it brings your awareness right to the present moment. It's a pretty amazing process because you are in that next step and the next few moments because you can't think any further past that.
Mm.
Yeah.
So interesting. You made me think a friend of mine, Ross Jacobson. He always said this quote that stuck with me, and he said, "Stop thinking things will be so easy and they won't be so hard."
Yeah, yeah, exactly. He nailed it. He
Right?
nailed it.
And I think of that all the time, and it's funny, like what you're putting yourself through. How many Ironmans have you done now?
I've done 14.
Yeah, it's amazing. And are you teed up to do another one?
Yeah, in Tempe in November.
Oh, you're in my area.
Yeah.
I'll try to put it on my calendar to heckle you along the way there.
Yeah. And I have done the one in Hawaii 4 times.
Wow.
That's the world championships. And it is it is beyond brutal. It is the toughest one of all.
Yeah, it's amazing. Okay, so the Iron Man is now just a fabric of your life, right?
Correct.
You
Yeah.
go through this, you put yourself through the discipline. You're pulling a ton out of that in terms of um, how it impacts your business life, right? So
Yeah.
catch us up on kind of what's happened with your corporate career and leadership. Kind of the pieces that kind of connect. Later as you've accomplished some of the things that I'm aware of.
Through my career, if you think about it, um, I went through the dot-com bust, right? And that bust, and I was with a startup. I was running sales. We went through 70 something $1 million, and you know, I got fired, and the company failed, and you know what I mean. And it was like, I just remember thinking to myself, like, what have I done? What a stupid career move.
Were you CEO at that point?
No, no, I was
Okay.
the head of sales.
Head of sales. Okay.
Yeah, that was early 2000s. And and then I hooked up with a company called Kronos,
Oh
now
yeah.
UKG.
Yeah.
It was a great company. Gave me some stability. I learned so much. I was effectively like a general manager, so I learned a lot about not just sales, but how to run services and marketing and product. And it was like the formation of my career
Yeah.
going to a CEO. It was just such a great experience. Um, and then, in 2008, I got my first CEO job, um, which it was about the worst time you could be a CEO
Yeah.
because
That's a tough time.
the banking crisis just came, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
and here I am, a new CEO, and I'm walking the halls telling people, hey, we're gonna have to let you go because the business just, you know, just dropped off, right? And that was Corporate Visions. That was in 2008. And I was like, oh man, this is tough.
Yeah.
And so we leaned out the company down to its core in 2000, late 2008, and then went on a run from 2009. And then we attracted private equity, and they came in and bought out the founders in 2010, which is Hammond, Kennedy, and Whitney, HKW. And we went on a tremendous run for the next 5 years and grew the company and was super successful. Again, on an aggregate, you look back and damn, this is my life, right? You look back and you go, oh, look at that. That's so pretty. You know what I mean? The From 2010 to 2015, there was all those bumps. From 2008 to 2000, it was not a straight line. I mean,
Yeah.
there was a lot of mistakes made and failures along the way. And
Yeah.
but again, falling back to that process, I was like, you know what? Do the right things for the right reasons with a heart that's in service to others, helping others fulfill their potential. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's what I love so much about being a CEO is like it's like as a leader, your job is to see if you can be the Michelangelo of this piece of marble and find the strength of that person, because every person, regardless, has this untapped potential, and can you find it and place it within your company? And sometimes, Dan, that means actually it's not in your company,
Mm.
and you help them transition out to go, there's not a role that like optimizes your strengths in this company. So let let me help you go find it outside of this company. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? And and it's so great to look back and see that all this that's transpired with people inside companies and outside. But so there was this run here with corporate visions that was fantastic. And
No, it was. I mean, I was familiar with you guys, and you know, uh, about the most respected group out there, right? I mean, you guys had such a not just a rapid growth, but sustainable, right? You guys and grew a great reputation within the industry and multiple vertical markets and model changes, tough things. It's interesting when I hear your story, things weren't easy. And you do go back to your foundation like regularly. That foundation of discipline, reflection, seeking out pain almost, right? Like seeking out knowing that it's going to hurt, but it's going to be okay. It's almost like you push yourself into kind of the human performance optimization mindset part of this so that when you know something goes wrong, you have the confidence that it's going to be okay.
yeah, and it's still hard, Dan. And I
Right.
still, even with all of that, I still struggle with it. You know what I mean? As you're in the CEO role, you've been there before. It is, there's decisions and there's processes that you have to go through that you can't tell everybody. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And you have to be able to make these decisions that not everybody's going to like, that you believe are in the best interest of the employees and their families. Because
Mhm.
I mean, I wake up every day and say, I'm fighting for my job every day.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I am
I
fighting for
do.
my
I,
job
I
every day
do.
because
You earn it every day. I feel the same way.
you do,
Yeah.
because it's like, I'm like, these people are counting on me to make really good decisions. You can't make decisions for Joe, Terry, or Dan,
No.
right? You can't do that. It's like that's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
And you wake up and you're like, okay, this is there's kids going to school, there's elderly parents that people are taking care of, there's car payments, there's house payments, there's vacations people want, there's lifestyles that they want. And and it's up to you to make decisions that optimize that.
Hmm. Yeah.
And if you
Couldn't
get
agree
in your
more.
own head and you let your ego take over, you're gonna F that up.
Yeah. What were some examples of mistakes you made as a leader? If you can share anything along those lines, that would be learning lessons for people. It might be new managers on listening, or somebody looking to move into leadership.
I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed, so I got to keep things simple because that's why, strong like bull, smart like tractor, just keep it simple. Um, it's like every day I'm fighting my ego. Every day. Every day I'm fighting that demon that wants to step in front of everything else.
Mm.
And most of the time I win, but sometimes I don't win, Dan, you know?
Yeah.
And as a new manager, or even as a very, because I've made this mistake as a seasoned CEO, I've made the mistake, you know? And I made the mistake as a as a new manager. You think it's about you and your performance. And the minute as a leader you can change that and say, it's not about me, it's about the other individual, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And come from a place, you know, come from a place of love. I know
Yeah.
that sounds,
No, it doesn't. And a place of humility.
this is agape love, and agape love is in service to your fellow human being.
Yeah.
It's not romantic love. It's not love like a family, but it's agape love. And and so that's the best advice I could give is when you're about to help somebody, or you're you're getting on a call and you're going to have this conversation, is can you come from a place of love? Because
Yeah.
when you come from that place, the ego can't get in front. It's impossible for the ego to get in front of it.
Yeah. Isn't it interesting, Joe? I mean, as a you're clearly a competitor. A lot of people that are successful kind of really tap into their competitive nature in whatever industry they're in, that they're in, and that balance between being uber competitive, which can drive you to kind of fulfill the ego, if you will, because you need to win. You need to be competitive. You know what I mean? And yet how that operates in conflict with being the best leader you can be.
Absolutely. And that was another evolution for me, because growing up as a competitive athlete, it is you against the other guy or gal,
Right.
right? It just is.
Yeah.
Okay. It's like he's going to start or I'm going to start, and we're on the same team.
Yeah. The guy with the clipboard walking down to get you out of the weight room could have got anybody.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. You're fighting for survival.
Right. And so and to transition from that to say, how I was able to do it is to put the blinders on and say, you know, and that was very nice what you said about my previous company, Corporate Visions. It still is a great company. But there was one thing I always, the team, when the team, and I do this with my current team at Culture Partners, when anybody says, well, oh, this is what so and so's doing, and this is what so and so's doing, I'm like, no. The minute I engage there is the minute my ego starts creeping back in, right? And I'm like, I don't care what they're doing. You guys, please, let's put them, has nothing to do with them. This has got to be about us and our purpose and our mission, and fulfilling that for our clients. And I don't care what anybody else is doing. I really don't. And early in my career, I'd go there and go, I want to kick their butt.
Yeah.
I want to be a better company than that company. That's a fruitless effort. You can never get ahead of the game.
Here's how far I'll go on this. A friend of mine, before I came into 2Win, he was actually the attorney that helped me with kind of locking things down in terms of moving forward to come on board. And we were, we became close, and some advice he gave me. He said, Dan, I'm going to tell you something that stuck with me my whole life. He said, comparison is the root of all evil.
Yeah.
And that's a little extreme, but it's so funny. Since he told me that 10, 11 years ago, I think about it all the time because of exactly what you're saying right now. Like, there's no upside. in whatever it is, personal relationships, friendships, money, success, business decisions of what you're talking about right now, of what whether it matters, whether you're focused on the competition, whatever industry you're in, if you're a real estate agent or you're in medical or whatever you do, comparison is the root of all evil. It doesn't get you to a higher place in whatever that is,
Right. Absolutely. And people have heard that, but it's, it's, there's the saying that you can't exercise your way out of a bad diet. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You ultimately can't achieve your full potential if you're worried about
Everything else.
ever, other people. Like
Yeah.
you're competing. You're reaching your full potential means abundance and having an abundance mindset. And I'm like, great. I hope that company does fantastic. You know what I mean? I hope that company does great. But I'm about the people here and what's in front of me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it's way easier said than done.
Oh yeah. Right. It's a daily exercise. I want to get to two other things.
Yeah.
I want to talk about failure.
Okay.
And I want to talk about, what does failure mean to you and how has failure impacted your life as a CEO, as a successful business person over the years?
I've been fired 3 times, and some people, have gone on, never been fired in their career. And that's okay too. But, you know, I look at it like going back to the Chuck Knox thing. I'm like, I got to go find something that I believe I can be the best I can be. Like, where's that full potential for me? And I don't think personally you can reach that full potential if you're not pushing the envelope in multiple facets to failure point. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
In everything you do.
So, what would be some practical examples of not that you're seeking to fail, but you're seeking to push yourself hard enough where failure can happen?
I'll turn it back to Iron Man for a
Mm-hmm.
second because it's a controlled environment where I can push to failure without impacting other people's lives.
It's a controlled failure bit of experiment in that
Right.
context. Yeah.
So it's like, how hard can I push on the bike to a point of almost failure that I can go get out on the marathon and not blow myself up and quit the race, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're always balancing that that piece of performance. And and there's different roles in different companies, so this doesn't apply to everybody. But if you grew up in sales, it's all about performance.
Yeah. Every day.
And that's why salespeople make more money than usually even the CEO. The top salespeople make more money because if you don't perform, you can't stick around, right? You're going to get fired. And so in my career, I've pushed the envelope on performance as a head of sales and as a CEO. Um, um, to the point to where, you know, others didn't believe in that strategy and said, you know, and I was willing to push that strategy to a point of failure. And you know what I mean? And if they said, hey, you don't get to do this job anymore,
Yeah.
then okay, but I'm going, you know what I mean? And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But again, it's nobody's dying as a result of, now if you're a commercial airline pilot, you probably don't want to do that, right?
I mean, let's hope not.
Go do it in the simulator. So when all hell does break loose, you can actually save lives, right? But in the business world that we're in, my employees sometimes come to me and they're like, "Oh my gosh, Joe, I've got some really bad news. XYZ happened. We lost this big account. And I'm like, that is, you guys, that is not bad news. Are you kidding me? Bad news would have been if you had told me something happened to a child of yours.
Mm.
That's bad news. What you just said is not bad news. We can solve that.
Mhm.
And so I always tell people push the envelope, but make sure you're pushing the envelope in service to others, in alignment with the laws of the universe, from a place of love, from a place of gratitude. Push that envelope. And if it doesn't work, we can fix that.
Yeah.
It's all with good intention.
Hmm.
You know what I mean?
Hmm.
But pushing the envelope in service to yourself
Yeah.
in a team environment, ooh, you make too many mistakes that way and you're going to be out.
Yeah. That's destructive, right? That's destructive.
Right.
Do you think that if people aren't willing to push the limit on things like really and that doesn't mean being destructive, right? That means being creative. That means taking a calculated risk. That means, things along those nature. Do you think if you're not willing to do that, you truly never reach your best version of yourself? Or how would you state that?
Absolutely. Unequivocally, drop the mic. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I've done this with my marketing team too. I've done this with the finance team. That come to me and they're like, "Wow, we're not sure what to do." Blah 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 blah. And they give me this scenario,
Yeah.
and I'm like, "You own it. You have accountability. Go ahead, make the decision." Well, what if it's wrong? All right, then it's wrong. We'll fix it. But they need to feel that, right? And if it's wrong, they need to go, I shouldn't say wrong, but if the decision doesn't work out optimally,
Yeah.
okay, well, what did we learn? Because if you aren't doing that, you're not learning anything.
Yeah.
You're staying in this like middle of the road, nice, comfy, cozy couch. That's not living.
Well, it's what you said earlier. It's the what did you call it? A comfort crisis?
Yes.
You could from a business standpoint, whatever your job is, for those listening, you could sometimes get too comfortable in a comfort crisis of your work life too,
Right.
so easily, right? And I'll also say this, as an employee, it's easy to get there when your manager doesn't give you the freedom to take a risk too, and so that can be a challenge for people as well.
That's a great point. Absolutely. When you're put in a box in your job,
Yeah.
then you're coming in and you're punching a clock and you're not growing. I mean, this whole life is about growing personally and professionally, right? And in our culture work, our mission is to unleash the power of culture to inspire people and businesses to reach their full potential. That's what culture is.
Yeah.
Putting people in a position to reach their full potential every day, right? And that means letting them make decisions, giving them the authority and have them take accountability and say, I'm going to run with that and be okay with that. And that is beauty. And, if you get your company from top to bottom doing that, you become unstoppable.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Now you have the hearts, the hearts and the mind of people, right? And if everybody's aligned towards the same objective with a culture that's aligned around that, inspiring people and businesses to reach their full potential and enabling people to take accountability in a culture of accountability, driving towards a set of results, unstoppable.
Yeah, you want to talk about optimizing human performance. That's it right there.
That's it. And that's why I love, what we do.
So that's what you're doing now. That was the other subject I wanted to get to. Is that's what you're doing now at Culture Partners, which is almost wild, right? Isn't it? Like, I'm big on reflection, clearly. Looking at how things have played out for you and now taking this core belief system that has shaped your whole life and now leading a company where that's the essence of what you do.
Right. Yeah. And it's going back to failure, Dan, I got fired from Corporate Visions. Like I took this company, not I, but I led it and I loved the people, still love the people there, loved what we did. I was
Yeah.
passionate about it. And and there was new investors in and they wanted to go a different I wanted to go one direction and I was saying I'm all in on this going here and they're like, hey, pick up your playbook, you don't get to play this game anymore. And that's the way, that's the job, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? And I get it, right? And I was like, all right. And I struggled emotionally to go, gosh, am I ever going to find anything, because I just can't be the leader of a company that sells widgets. I have to be all in emotionally on the impact we're making.
Joe, before you go into culture partners and how that ends up, really being such a great fit, how did you deal with that failure, right? What did you go back to? What did you tap into? You said you struggled, right? A little bit through that. How did you take yourself through it? Because I think it might help people to hear.
Yeah, that good question. And you said you're big on reflection, as am I, and I had to do some serious reflecting and look at and take accountability myself. Like, I wasn't mad at those guys that they fired me. They were great guys.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I was upset. I was crying. I was emotional. I felt like, the company was better with me in it, but they didn't feel that way, and that's okay. Um, and I had to reflect, and it was a really tough process to say, okay, what was my accountability in that process?
Mm.
Where did Joe Terry make decisions or actions that contributed to this, right? Um, and sometimes it's your lesson, sometimes it's not. And I took inventory of that and it was like, all right, I need to learn some things because if I don't, that will repeat at some point.
Mm.
And so I went to a place of reflection and, went back to my personal purpose, went back to my long term goals. What is it that I want to do? And I went right back to that process,
Right
Dan,
back to that blueprint.
and said, okay. And then, I kept training because that was a constant in my life, and I'm like, the universe is going to align in a way that will show up and present itself in a way, and I knew it would unfold. I didn't know it would unfold. I believed it would unfold.
Yeah.
I trusted that it would unfold. And it took some different turns during that process,
Yeah.
and I helped some other companies. I invested in another one.
Yeah, I remember talking to you during that time, right, where you were figuring it out. But what's interesting during that time, when you say going back to that process, right, you're going back to that process, back to that blueprint, but it's what you said earlier, by going to a place where you're pushing yourself through pain, it's going to be okay.
Right.
Like, you don't know what's necessarily right around the corner or what that wave is, how big that wave's going to be that you're super tired, or how you're going to feel when you switch from the bike to the running, but you're just going to keep going and it's going to be okay.
And it was day by day, literally, you know what I mean? And it was, and then, this opportunity showed up, and it was a former, it was one of the investors, the private equity group that purchased Corporate Visions from the owners of Corporate Visions. They bought this company, and they called me up and they said, "Hey, we know you're super passionate about culture. Would you take a look at this company for us? And and we think, there might be a good fit here for you."
Yeah.
And lo and behold, it was. I was like, wow.
It's amazing.
The interesting thing, Dan, that it became, and I don't want to say one's better than the other because that's not
Sure.
it. It's just different. But what it did give me, and again, it's so crazy that my purpose in life, right, is this commitment to optimizing human performance. And so when I got into this job, I'm like, with this company, we really have the opportunity to impact more lives. So we go into companies and we're helping with culture. That's all about optimizing human potential of individuals because culture is a living, breathing organism that's changing and evolving every day, right? And it's all about people interacting with one another. And if you can create and optimize a culture, you're optimizing the personal and professional performance of those people in the whole company.
Mhm.
So the opportunity to impact so many lives with work, it's just I wake up every day just thinking how blessed I am, and it's not without its challenges. You know what I mean? I'm like, holy mackerel. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We've been feels like we've been through hell and back in this company, but we're doing things for the right reasons. And boy, I don't know if I could find a better fit that aligns with my purpose.
Yeah. I
But
agree.
that doesn't mean I won't get fired tomorrow. As you and I talked about, we have to wake up every day and earn our jobs. You know what I mean? Because,
I always thought it was the Navy kid in me. I don't know. I think it does have something to do with coming back to childhood. You know, I just every day you earn it every day.
yeah,
With what you're doing now at Culture Partners, it's interesting too because you have to connect with CEOs, business owners, leaders that believe culture makes a difference and that believe or you can get them to understand they're open to the conversation,
right,
but some people aren't, right? Some people don't think that way
right.
and they're numbers focused or this way. And not that you can't be numbers focused and believe in culture. In order to be a successful leader, I think you got to consider all variables, but there's some people that aren't as open to wanting to get into this subject. And I'm curious, how do you deal with that? Because I'm bought in on culture, right? I mean, to me, if the culture's not right, everything's off,
Right,
like at its bones. You know what I mean?
right.
Do you have to be a little evangelistic relative to culture when you're inspiring thinking along this way with leading the company you're leading?
Yeah. You just stepped right into that one. It is all evangelism. You know what I mean? So when I talk to friends or other CEOs or just people in my network like you and we're
Yeah.
talking about, people are like, "Oh, that's so great. Everybody needs that." I'm like, "Yeah, they do." But it's evangelism because um I look at it like when you talk to a CEO, and every CEO, almost every 9 out of 10 will say culture's critical. But when you say, what's culture? All of them have a different answer for what they believe culture is.
So to that point, for listeners, um, how would you describe culture? As it relates to someone's work environment. You know what I mean? There's people in different jobs listening to the podcast right now. When you talk about culture, how do you define it?
Culture is about results. You first need to say it's not soft. Culture is about getting results. The results that a company is getting today is all as a result of their current culture. There's a culture, whether you like it or not, it's happening, right? And so if you're getting crappy results, your culture is feeding those. If you're getting great results, your culture, it's there and it's delivering results. Culture is how you activate, results, right? And so first people need to understand it's about getting results. That's what culture does, right? Now, in order to get results, you have to get people to give a shit. It's about capturing the hearts of people. How do you get people to give a shit, right? So it's about results and it's about people giving a shit, coming to work every day. If a CEO says, hey, here's my 5 issues in my business today, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I say, what if your people really gave a shit? Just on a deep heart level, cared about what they were doing. He or she goes like this. Oh, those 4 go away.
Mm.
Right? So it's about capturing the heart of your people. Now, how you do that is it's about experiences that shape our beliefs. So the employees are having experiences every day in their work. And those experiences, how they're seeing people think and act, those experiences are shaping what their beliefs are. Do I like it here? Do I not like it here? Is that person nice to me? Do they care about me? Does my company care about me? Right? It's shaping those beliefs. Those beliefs are what drive your actions. How you do your work is driven by your belief structure. And then how you do your work translates into results. And so it's experiences that shape your beliefs, beliefs drive your actions, and actions drive your results. That's culture. That's the methodology for how you manage culture. And if you start from the bottom and you say, hey, if I start from a place of love, you know, a place of heart, right? And I create experiences from a place of the heart, you become unstoppable. So it's about, these companies say, well, we want to be a $5 billion company. Okay. What the hell does that matter to this person down here? How do you get them connected from the heart to give a shit about what they're doing, to care about that $5 billion number, which is the result you want to achieve?
Mm.
And it's all done through culture. It's creating those experiences that connect their heart to that.
Got it.
Once they have that purpose and they are connected to that purpose, your company becomes unstoppable. It is like a thing of beauty to watch.
Well, and that's where your actions, I'm making choices as an employee to do something that's in the best interest of someone or the I'm making a choice for what's the right thing to do, not necessarily what's in the process rulebook, because you can't always, all the answers aren't there. And
Right.
so the more you're connected all the way through on why what you're doing matters and that you do want to make a positive difference, then your choices and actions are probably typically good. So that's when you start getting those multipliers, right? Across the business of good actions and good choices.
And think about that. You're exactly right, Dan. Think about that first, just a second. And what happens when that experience comes in, where you've got that person in that environment that wants to take credit for the work that somebody else is doing, or takes an idea, or it's all about them, right?
Yeah.
All of a sudden, you've just broken that chain from top to bottom that was once unstoppable. And that person is creating one piece of toxicity in your culture. And you let too many of those experiences happen, and people come into that work environment, Dan, and they're like, oh, that's how we do things around here. Okay.
Yeah.
No, really. And
This
they're
is the
like, okay,
expectation.
I'm
Yeah.
offered information and I'm going to kick ass in my job, but I'm not sharing anything with anybody because I want my boss to know I'm doing this.
Right. Right.
All of a sudden, you've just destroyed what could be an unstoppable force. That's culture.
I love it. So two comments on this. I've always believed culture starts at the top, but I believe that culture is protected by the many.
Yes.
You know, like I think I just have always been brought up in that kind of a work environment where how can I contribute to protecting the kind of work environment that I want to be a part of? You know what I mean? And so when you're in that interaction, whether you work at Walmart or Amazon or Nordstrom, you know, or any of the other tech companies out there, you have a role to play in your culture
Yeah.
and a responsibility to protect it. And so I think the more people buy into that, the more you all grow the kind of culture you want.
Absolutely. And you're exactly right. And it does start at the very top. The CEO, she has to be all in on this, right? All in. You, if they're not all in, this is a fruitless effort
Yeah.
because they have to drive it and I call it the chief reminding officer. They have to keep reminding because it takes a while to go through the organization, right? And it has to go through the entire organization. And that's why it was so great when I came to Culture Partners. And I was always big on culture, but I just put it on my back and drug it like with brute force because, I'm smart like a tractor, I was just like, just brute force.
And you drove through it like a bull.
Yeah. And I'm like, oh, there's actually a methodology that you can scale the leader at the top and scale it through the company so that she doesn't have to do all of the work because that's hard to do with 5,000, 10,000, 20,000 employees. So how do you scale it, right? And I'm like, oh, okay. Here's a simple process to scale that at the very top. Because I talk to CEOs all the day, every day, and they're like, oh, I love culture. I'm all into culture. I'm big on culture and I do this and I do that. And I go, yeah, but you know what? Is what you're doing, if I go talk to the line employee, are they totally aligned with you? Well, no, not really. Well, yeah, because you're passionate about it, but it's not scaling through the
Right.
organization.
Yeah.
So you aren't unleashing the power of culture and inspiring your people and your business to reach its full potential. You're not.
Yeah. Ultimately, to truly create something special.
Right.
Because, like when we look back at our work careers, we all know where did we work that really was a special moment.
Right.
Right. And often for people, like if you stayed somewhere, I stayed at SunGuard for 15 years. A lot of times there are chapters within that were special because there was a leader there that
Yeah.
inspired that kind of culture. Amazing. If I had to recap kind of some of the key 2% factors, it was going back into the early years on that goal setting exercise between where you are and where you could be, right?
Yeah.
Looking back at that journey through sports all the way to the Seahawks, that hard discipline of what the grind and embracing the grind,
Yeah.
right? It made a difference for you and you got to your top 4 out of 5 goals. And then reflecting back on recognizing that blueprint that you created was a blueprint for your future success. And then some other 2% highlight factors that stand out to me is your personal belief in truly trying to do what's right and trying to your true north, knowing your true north is always trying to do the right thing and agape love, like you talked about, like truly trying to be a leader in service to the people, and that balance between what it takes with confidence to get to what is success, but doing it with humility as a servant kind of based leader. Did I miss anything? Anything else you'd add in there?
No, that was it. And I'll just add a color to a couple things. Those hard things might be for somebody that says, look, I'm going to wake up tomorrow and I'm going to go for a walk for 15 minutes up and down the street.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be disciplined in the fact that I'm going to do that every day for the next week or whatever. The hard thing doesn't need to be like go run a marathon. The hard thing is just that little push in your brain that says, it's a little cold out there. I want to sleep in. But the moment you step out of bed that one day and push through that millisecond and put your shoes on and go for a walk down the street and back, you've just created a synopsis in the brain and that bond that says, okay, the next time I'm at an adverse situation, I can work through it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So it's just little things. It doesn't, for anybody listening, it doesn't have to be this big thing. It's just, it's those little things. Don't overthink that piece of the equation. Like, oh, okay, he played football or he does Ironman. So yeah, that doesn't fit for me. Yeah, it's like do a 5 minute meditation, write in a journal, sit down quietly and for 5 minutes and have a cup of coffee. Whatever that you believe is something that you really want to do that you haven't been able to do, if you can push yourself through that process, it becomes absolutely game changing. And I did remember the last thing I'll say, just on the color. The in service thing is really selfish because it makes you feel so freaking good
Yeah.
that it's almost not even fair. And that's the beauty of the law of the universe, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like when you're serving others, the fulfillment in that is like it feels so freaking good. It's almost not fair, Dan,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, but it is in service
Yeah.
and it's without expectation of anything in return.
Mm. Love it.
So that's the color.
Super inspiring, Joe. And on the previous point you made about doing the little things, you're absolutely right. Whether you're a real estate agent, it's making that extra cold call, or you're a pharma rep, right? You're just make that one extra stop, right? Whatever position you're in, it doesn't. You're right. It doesn't have to be. Did I make it to the professional level of a sports team, or
Right.
CEO of a company? It's about building. I think back to what you said earlier, doing the little things that are hard in order to build the muscle of conditioning your brain that you're going to push through the pain and push through maybe even the mental block. It may not be physical pain, it might be a mental block. And then you see that you did it and you feel good about doing it. And that's the pattern towards success. Yeah.
Yeah. It's that little nudge. And hard is relative, but it's that little nudge where that voice is telling you, I don't, uh, let's just not do that. It's okay.
Yeah.
That's when, if you just step into that, that's the game changer right there. That one instant you step into that changes the game.
Love it. Serious 2% factor moment for sure. Okay. Last question we like to ask every guest. So I'm excited to hear what your answer is. What would you tell your 22-year-old self?
Oh, now I'm almost getting emotional. Holy smokes. Don't worry, your life's going to be beautiful.
love it.
It's all going to be good. All those things you were worried about, you're going to have lots of failures. You're going to have lots of setbacks, but it's going to exceed your wildest expectations.
Well, I think that's a perfect ending to an amazing conversation. Joe, can't thank you enough. It was a wonderful conversation today. Everybody, please like, subscribe, share, and look for us to drop an episode every other Monday. And we appreciate you watching.